Maria Richards stood in her honeymoon suite at 11:47 p.m., watching her husband remove his wedding ring. That's when she noticed something impossible. A shadow moved across his hand, but the light source never changed. When she looked up at his face, Edward was smiling at her, but something about his eyes had changed. They flickered for just a moment, revealing something ancient and burning beneath the surface, and she realized with growing horror that in 3 years of dating, she'd never seen his reflection clearly in a mirror. Not once. By midnight, she would discover the truth. By morning, she would understand that the man she married wasn't a man at all. He was something far older, far darker, and bound to her by forces beyond human comprehension. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Now let's begin. Maria Richard was 34 years old when she met Edward Archer at a charity gala in New Orleans. She worked as a rare books curator for a private collection, lived alone in a historic apartment in the French Quarter, and had mostly given up on finding someone who understood her fascination with ancient texts and occult history. Edward approached her during the cocktail hour, introducing himself as an antiquities dealer specializing in religious artifacts. What struck Maria most was how perfectly they connected. He knew obscure details about medieval manuscripts she'd only read about in academic journals. He spoke Latin fluently, even ancient dialects she'd never heard pronounced. He seemed to appear exactly when she needed him and vanish just as seamlessly when she wanted solitude. Looking back later, Maria would realize she should have noticed the patterns. Edward never ate food blessed by a priest at religious functions. He avoided churches, claiming allergies to incense. His apartment had no mirrors, which he explained away as a personal aesthetic choice. He had no family photos, saying his relatives had all passed away. Animals became agitated around him. Dogs would bark, cats would hiss, birds would fall silent. But Maria was in love, and love has a way of making us overlook the details that don't quite add up. Edward proposed after 18 months of dating in an old cemetery at midnight under a blood moon. The ring was antique, dark metal with a stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She had no reason to doubt that she'd found her soulmate, but on their wedding night, Maria would discover that Edward had been hiding something far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined, and the word soulmate would take on a meaning she never expected. If you're hooked already, drop a comment saying I'm watching. Let's see who makes it to the end. The wedding was held at a historic mansion at dusk. Maria wore a vintage ivory dress and felt happier than she'd ever been. Edward stood at the altar, looking calm and impossibly handsome, watching her walk down the aisle with an expression she interpreted as love. During the ceremony, Maria's best friend Emma whispered to another bridesmaid, "Did you see?" When the priest said the blessing, Edward's face went strange. Just for a second. But the comment was dismissed as wedding day jitters and champagne talking. The reception was lovely. Maria noticed that Edward never touched the blessed wine and kept his distance from the small chapel on the property. But he explained he wanted to focus on celebrating with their guests. She found it charming, attentive even. At 10 p.m. they headed up to the honeymoon suite, a beautiful room in the mansion's tower, with Gothic windows, candles flickering on every surface, and an enormous antique mirror that had been covered with a cloth at Edward's request. Edward closed the door and locked it with an old iron key. Maria set down her bouquet, ready for the romantic moment she'd been anticipating. But Edward held up one hand, stopping her. "Before we go any further," he said, his voice different somehow, deeper, resonant with harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human throat. There's something you need to know. Maria's heart skipped. What is it? Are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Edward walked to the covered mirror and stood before it. But I'm not what you think I am. What do you mean? Maria laughed nervously. You're scaring me, Edward. He turned back to her, and in the candlelight, his eyes flashed with an inner fire, literally, flames dancing in the depths of his pupils. I mean, I'm not human, Maria. I never was. The words hung in the air. Maria waited for the punchline, for Edward to laugh and tell her it was a weird joke. But he just stood there, his shadow moving independently on the wall behind him, writhing like something alive. That's not funny, she finally said. It's not meant to be funny. It's the truth. Edward pulled away the cloth covering the mirror. Look. And what Maria saw in that mirror would shatter her understanding of reality forever. But before we get to that shocking moment, make sure you've hit that like button. Maria found herself frozen as she looked into the mirror. Edward stood next to her, but his reflection was wrong. Terribly, impossibly wrong. Where Edward should have been, there was a figure wreathed in shadow and smoke. Its true form was tall and angular, with features too sharp to be human, eyes that burned like coals, skin that seemed to shift between flesh and darkness, and behind it, barely visible, the suggestion of wings, not feathered, but leathery and torn, like a bat's wings that had survived centuries. Oh my God! Maria stumbled backward until she hit the wall. Oh my God! What are you? Not God, Edward said with dark irony. Quite the opposite, actually. The technical term in your human languages is demon, though I prefer to think of myself as one of the fallen. I was cast down from the higher realms about 3,000 years ago during the Great Rebellion. The goal of my kind is to walk among humans, to influence, to corrupt, to claim souls. Maria's mind was racing. This can't be real. This is some kind of trick or hallucination. It's not. Edward held up his hand. As Maria watched, his human skin began to crack like porcelain, revealing something darker underneath. Scales or shadow, she couldn't tell which. Then his hand transformed completely, fingers elongating into claws, skin turning ashen and gray. My true form exists on a different plane. This human shell is just a construct, a disguise. It takes considerable energy to maintain. Stop, Maria whispered. Please stop. But Edward continued. He opened his mouth wider than any human could, revealing rows of sharp teeth and a darkness beyond darkness in his throat. His eyes fully ignited, burning with hellfire. And when he spoke, his voice layered with multiple tones. His human voice, and beneath it, something ancient and terrible. I am Edward Archer, but I am also Edrazel, Duke of the Ninth Circle, Keeper of Forbidden Knowledge, Tempter of the Faithful. Maria slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her wedding dress pooling around her. Why? Why would you do this? Why would you marry me? Edward's form flickered between human and demonic. Because that was my mission. Demons don't just tempt humans toward obvious sins, murder, greed, lust. Those are crude tools. The real prize is corrupting a pure soul, making someone good choose darkness of their own free will. Marriage is the ultimate corruption, an oath before God, binding a soul through love and devotion. And you, Maria, with your fascination with forbidden knowledge, your work with occult texts, your isolation from faith, you were, from a strategic standpoint, the perfect target. Each word felt like a knife. Maria's entire world was crumbling. Comment, still here if you're still watching. This is where things get even more intense. Target, Maria repeated numbly. I was a target. But something unexpected happened, Edward continued, his form settling back into his human appearance. The longer I stayed in human form, the more I interacted with you, the more I changed. Demons aren't supposed to feel human emotions. We simulate them, we manipulate them, but we don't experience them. But with you, Maria, something shifted. When you smile, something in my essence responds. When you're hurt, I feel, I don't know what you'd call it. Pain? Regret? Is it possible for a demon to develop a soul through prolonged contact with humanity? I don't know. But what I feel for you has become more than strategy. Maria looked up at him through tears. You're a demon. You're literally from hell. You don't love me. You can't love me. You're evil incarnate. And what is evil, Maria? What is good? Edward sat down across from her, carefully maintaining his human form. I rebelled against a tyrannical order. I chose free will over blind obedience. Yes, I've committed acts you would call evil. I've tempted, corrupted, destroyed. But I've also seen the cruelty humans inflict on each other without any demonic influence. I've watched your species justify atrocities in the name of good. The line between angel and demon, good and evil, isn't as clear as your religions claim. No. Maria shook her head violently. No, there's a difference. There has to be a difference. Why? Because your God says so? The same God who allows children to suffer, who permits war and famine, who created us and then punished us for questioning. Edward leaned forward. I chose you not just because you were vulnerable, but because you ask questions others are afraid to ask. You study forbidden texts because you want truth, not comfortable lies. If that's not a kindred spirit, what is? Maria pulled away. You're trying to corrupt me right now. This is what you do. Am I? Edward said quietly. Or am I the first person who's ever been completely honest with you about the nature of existence, about the ambiguity of morality, about the possibility that good and evil are human constructs, not cosmic absolutes? Maria sat there on the floor, staring at the creature that looked like her husband. The worst part was that she'd spent her career studying exactly these questions. The gray areas of morality in ancient texts, the contradictions in religious doctrine, the uncomfortable truths that organized religion tried to suppress. Why tell me? She finally asked. Why reveal yourself now? Because living a lie indefinitely seemed wrong. Edward paused, as if surprised by his own word choice. 3,000 years ago, I wouldn't have cared. But now, having lived as something approximating human, having experienced what might be love, or its demonic equivalent, I found I couldn't continue the deception. You deserve to know what you've bound yourself to. You deserve to choose whether to stay or go with full knowledge. And if I want to leave, will you let me? Or will you drag me to hell? I'll let you go. But Maria, you need to understand something important about our marriage bond. Edward's expression grew serious. When you said your vows, when you accepted this ring, you entered into a contract that exists on multiple planes of reality. I can't break it, and neither can you. Not without consequences. But what those consequences were would prove to be far more complex than Maria could imagine. Don't go anywhere. Maria's about to discover the true nature of what she's bound herself to. What kind of consequences? Maria stood up, needing to pace. Are you saying I'm trapped? That I'm damned now? It's more complicated than that. Edward stood as well, shadows dancing around his feet despite the still candlelight. Marriage in the old ways, the ways that still matter in the realms beyond human perception, is a binding of souls. By marrying me, you've created a tether. I can sense you now, always. Your emotions, your location, your very essence. And you, he gestured to her. You might start to sense me, too. To see things you shouldn't be able to see. What things? The truth behind the world. The demons walking among humans. The angels are watching from above. The spiritual warfare happening in every moment, invisible to most mortals. Edward walked to the window and looked out at the darkened grounds. You asked if you're damned. The answer is, not automatically. Your soul is still yours, but it's marked now. Other demons will sense it. They'll know you're under my protection or my influence, depending on their perspective. Maria felt sick. So I'm marked, like cattle. Like a queen on a chessboard, Edward corrected. Valuable, powerful, contested. I don't want to be contested. I want my normal life back, Maria's voice rose. I want to go back to yesterday when the worst of my problems was whether my dress would fit right. There is no going back, only forward. Edward turned to face her, and for a moment his true form flickered through, something ancient and terrible and somehow sad. But you have choices, Maria. You always have choices. That's what makes you more powerful than you realize. What choices? You just said we're bound. We are. But how we live within that binding, that's up to us. Edward pulled out an ancient book Maria had never seen before. Its cover was made of something that looked like leather but felt wrong. This is the Codex Matrimonium, the Book of Bindings. It contains the rules, the limits, the possibilities of what we are now. The book fell open to a page written in languages that shifted as Maria looked at them. Latin, Hebrew, symbols she didn't recognize, and underneath it all, English translations appearing like subtitles. A demon-human binding can take many forms, Edward read. The human may choose to embrace the darkness and become a willing servant. The human may choose to resist and live in perpetual conflict. Or, he paused, his finger hovering over a passage that glowed with faint light. The human may choose the third path. What's the third path? Edward looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw something that might have been hope. Balance. You retain your humanity, your free will, your soul, but you gain knowledge of the hidden world, power to protect yourself, the ability to see truth that others can't. And he hesitated. I remain bound to you, which means I can't fully give in to my demonic nature. Your presence, your choices, your morality, they act as a chain on me. Not a chain of imprisonment, but of accountability. So I'd be what? A demon's conscience? More like a demon's anchor to something better than he was designed to be. Maria stared at the book, at the impossible choice before her. And what she was about to discover would change everything she thought she knew about good, evil, and the nature of love itself. If you're still watching, hit that like button right now. What happens next will blow your mind. And if I refuse? If I choose none of these paths? Maria asked. Edward's expression darkened. Then the binding begins to tear. Your soul, caught between human and demon realms, would slowly fracture. You'd lose your mind first, seeing things, hearing things, unable to distinguish reality from the spiritual plane. Then your body would begin to fail. Most humans who reject a demonic binding die within a year, their essence consumed by the conflict. So it's not really a choice. It's an ultimatum. It's reality. You married a demon, Maria. There are consequences to that. I tried to prevent this. I almost walked away from you a dozen times. But I was selfish. I wanted you anyway. For the first time, genuine remorse crossed his features. I'm sorry. I should have been stronger. Maria walked to the window, looking out at the night. Below, she could see people walking on the grounds, wedding guests heading to their cars, laughing and chatting. Normal humans with normal problems, unaware that above them, a woman was choosing between impossible options. Then she noticed something. One of the figures below wasn't walking normally. It moved too smoothly, and when it passed under a streetlight, it cast no shadow. As she watched, it looked up directly at her, and its eyes glowed red. "Edward," she said quietly, "there's something down there." He was beside her instantly, looking out. His jaw tightened. "Vesnoth, a rival from my circle. He must have sensed the binding." "What does he want?" "You. Or more specifically, to corrupt you before I can stabilize the binding. If he can turn you toward darkness first, he gains status. And Edward's hands clenched. "I would be destroyed for failing my mission." "Your mission that you claim to no longer care about?" "Whether I care about it or not, the laws of hell still apply to me. I'm still bound to those rules, Maria. That's why the third path is so important. If you choose it, we create a new binding, one that transcends hell's jurisdiction. But if you're corrupted by another demon first, or if you die because of the binding conflict, I'm held responsible." Maria's mind raced. The demon below was now entering the building. She could hear footsteps on the stairs. Too many footsteps, as if multiple things were climbing. "How long do I have to choose?" "Minutes, maybe less. Once Vesnoth reaches this room, everything becomes a battle for your soul. And in your current state, unmarked by choice, you're vulnerable." Maria turned away from the window and faced Edward fully. "Tell me the truth, and I'll know if you're lying. I can feel it somehow. Like you said. Do you love me? Really love me? Or is this still just strategy?" Edward met her eyes, and for a moment his human disguise fell away completely. She saw his true form, terrible and beautiful, ancient and broken. A being who had chosen rebellion over obedience, damnation over submission, and who had somehow, impossibly, found something in a human curator of rare books that awakened whatever remained of his original, angelic nature. "I don't know what love is anymore," he said, his voice layered with 3,000 years of existence. "But what I feel for you is the closest thing to grace I've experienced since the fall. If that's not love, it's something no demon should be capable of feeling." The door shook. Something was trying to get in. Maria made her decision. "Comment third path if you're still watching. We're about to reach the most important moment." "I choose the third path," Maria said. "Tell me what to do." Edward's relief was visible even through his demonic form. "We need to complete the binding ritual before Vesnoth breaks through. It requires blood, will, and words of power." He grabbed the Codex Matrimonium and opened it to a specific page covered in symbols that hurt to look at. "Read these words exactly as they're written. And Maria, once you speak them, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me as surely as I'm bound to you." Will I become a demon? No, but you'll be changed. Human, but no longer entirely mortal. You'll live as long as I exist. You'll have powers, minor ones, but real, and you'll be able to see the truth of the world, for better or worse. The door cracked. Black smoke began seeping through the gaps. Do it, Maria said. Edward pulled out a ceremonial knife, ancient, covered in runes. Your hand. Maria held out her hand without hesitation. He drew the blade across her palm, and her blood welled up, strangely luminous in the candlelight. Then he cut his own hand, and his blood was black as ink. They clasped hands, blood mingling. Now read, Edward commanded. Maria read the words, and as she spoke them, they transformed in her mouth from Latin to something older, something that predated human language. She felt power flowing through her, burning and freezing simultaneously. I, Maria Richard, of mortal birth and immortal soul, do bind myself to Edward Archer, called Edrazel of the fallen, by choice freely made and will unbroken. Let no force divide us. Let no power claim me. Let no darkness take me save that which I accept. In balance we stand, in truth we bind, in love, or its shadow, we endure. The room exploded with light and darkness simultaneously. The door burst open and Vesnoth entered, a creature of pure malevolence, more obviously demonic than Edward, with horns and claws and eyes like burning sulfur. But when he saw Maria and Edward, hands clasped, blood mingling, words of power still echoing in the air, he stopped. You invoke the third path? Vesnoth's voice was like grinding stone. You fool, Edrazel! You've bound yourself to a mortal's mercy. She'll be your destruction. Or my salvation, Edward replied. His form was changing, becoming something between his human guise and his true demonic nature. More solid, more real, anchored by Maria's choice. Either way, she's under my protection now. Challenge her, and you challenge me directly. Vesnoth's eyes narrowed. The council will hear of this. Let them. Edward's voice carried absolute authority. I've broken no law. The third path is ancient, recognized even in hell. She chose freely, with full knowledge. The binding is complete and inviolate. For a long moment, Vesnoth stood there, calculating. Then he turned and vanished in a cloud of sulphurous smoke. Maria's legs gave out. Edward caught her, gently lowering her to the floor. She felt different, every sense heightened, awareness expanding. When she looked at Edward now, she could see both his forms simultaneously, the human mask and the demonic truth existing together. What have I done? She whispered. Saved us both, Edward replied. Or possibly damned us both. Time will tell. But what would happen next would prove that their binding was even more significant than either of them realized. Make sure you're subscribed, because the next part of this story is absolutely incredible. For a long moment, they sat there in the candlelit room, human and demon, wife and husband, trying to figure out how to exist in this new reality. Finally, Maria spoke. I can see things now. The room is layered, like there are multiple versions of it existing at once. You're seeing the spiritual plane overlaid on the physical, Edward explained. Most humans are blind to it, but you're not fully human anymore. Not fully anything, really. You exist in the between spaces now. Maria looked at her hand where he'd cut her. The wound had already healed, leaving only a silver scar that glowed faintly. What am I? The term in the old texts is bound one, A human who has willingly entered into a pact with a demon while retaining their free will and soul. It's incredibly rare. Most humans either reject the binding and die, or embrace it fully and lose their humanity. Edward stood and helped her to her feet. You've done something almost no one has ever accomplished. You've found the middle ground. What can I do? What powers do I have? You can see demons and angels for what they truly are. You can sense supernatural presences. You can't be possessed or directly influenced by demonic power. The binding protects you. And he hesitated. You can draw on my power to a limited degree. In moments of danger, you can summon me no matter where I am. Maria walked to the mirror. Her reflection looked normal, mostly, but her eyes had changed subtly. They held depths they hadn't before, and occasionally, just for a moment, they flickered with the faintest hint of fire. What about you? How has this changed you? Edward's expression was complex. I'm bound to your morality now. If you choose good, I'm compelled toward it. If you fall into darkness, I'm strengthened by it. We're a feedback loop. You influence me, I influence you. It's a constant balance, a perpetual negotiation between light and dark. So I'm literally your conscience. And I'm your connection to power and knowledge beyond human limits. He moved closer. Maria, there's something else you need to know. Other demons will sense what we've done. Some will be curious. Some will be hostile. We're an anomaly, a disruption to the established order. Hell doesn't like disruptions. What about heaven? What do the angels think of this? Edward's laugh was bitter. The angels are worse in some ways. They see you as corrupted, tainted by demonic influence. They see me as doubly damned, a fallen angel who has now bound himself to a human in mockery of divine marriage. If we encounter angels, they're more likely to try to save you by destroying me, and possibly you too, as collateral damage. Maria felt the weight of what she'd chosen settling on her. So we're enemies of both heaven and hell. We're anomalies to both, but we're not alone. Edward pulled out his phone, incongruously modern in this supernatural conversation. There are others, not many, but they exist. Other bound ones, other third-path marriages. There's a network, a community of sorts. People who've chosen to exist in the gray areas between good and evil, human and supernatural. He showed her a website that looked like a normal social media platform, but the content was anything but normal. Posts about demonic encounters, tips for binding maintenance, support groups for humans married to supernatural beings. This is real? There are others like us? About 200 worldwide at any given time. The binding is difficult to maintain. Most fail within a few years. But those who succeed... Edward scrolled to a photo of an elderly couple. These two have been bound for 70 years. She's human, he's a demon. They've built a life together, walking the line between worlds. Maria stared at the screen, seeing her future reflected in these other impossible relationships. And what she realized next would change everything. Comment mind blown if you're still watching. We're about to reach the biggest revelation. Over the next 2 weeks, Maria and Edward navigated their strange new marriage. They returned to New Orleans, to their respective apartments, which they now began combining into one shared space. Maria discovered her new abilities gradually. She could see demons walking the streets of the French Quarter. There were dozens of them, disguised as tourists, street performers, fortune tellers. She could sense supernatural energy in the old buildings, residue from centuries of rituals and hauntings. And she could feel Edward's presence constantly, a warmth in her mind that told her exactly where he was and roughly what he was feeling. The connection went both ways. Edward could sense her emotions, her needs, her fears, and she noticed changes in him too. He started eating food, not because he needed to, but because she enjoyed cooking for someone. He began appearing in mirrors, his reflection becoming more solid the longer they were bound. He even started feeling pain, something demons normally couldn't experience. "You're becoming more human," she observed one night as they sat on their balcony overlooking Jackson Square. "And you're becoming more than human," Edward replied. "That's the nature of the binding. We meet in the middle." "Do you regret it?" Edward thought for a long moment. "Ask me in a century. Maybe I'll know by then." But their peaceful adjustment period was about to end. One night, Maria woke to find Edward standing at the window, his form flickering between human and demon. "They're coming," he said quietly. "Who?" "The Council of Fallen, the ruling body of Hell's earthly operations. They want to examine our binding, to determine if it's legitimate or if I've somehow violated infernal law." Maria's stomach clenched. "And if they decide you violated their law, they'll try to break the binding, which means killing you. It's the only way to sever it completely. And then they'll punish me, probably through dissolution. That's when a demon is unmade, their essence scattered across dimensions until nothing remains. We need to run. We can't run from the council. They have resources beyond anything you can imagine." Edward turned to face her. "But we can prepare. We can gather allies. And we can make a case that what we've done is not just legitimate, but potentially important." "Important how?" "Think about it, Maria. For thousands of years, heaven and hell have been at war, with humanity caught in the middle. But what if there's a third option? What if humans and demons, or humans and angels for that matter, could form genuine partnerships? Not corruption, not possession, but true collaboration. What if the third path isn't an anomaly, but a potential bridge between worlds?" Maria saw where he was going. "You want to argue that our marriage is a peace offering, a demonstration that coexistence is possible. More than possible. Beneficial. You've already changed me, Maria. I'm not the demon I was 6 months ago, and you've gained knowledge and power that make you more than you were. Together, we're something new. Something that threatens the established order, yes. But maybe that order needs to be threatened." It was a bold idea, possibly a suicidal idea. But as Maria thought about it, she realized it might be their only chance. "How do we make this case to a council of demons who have no reason to care about peace or coexistence?" Edward's smile was sharp and distinctly demonic. "We find the one thing they do care about: power and advantage. If we can demonstrate that third path bindings create stronger, more effective agents than traditional corruption or possession, they'll listen. Demons are evil, but they're not stupid. They respond to results." But what neither of them knew was that someone else had already been watching their binding with great interest. Someone from the other side of the eternal war. What do you think happens next? Drop your predictions in the comments. The conclusion will shock you. The Council of Fallen arrived 3 days later, not with fire and brimstone, but with lawyers and clipboards. They appeared in Maria and Edward's living room at exactly 3 a.m., 7 demons in immaculate business suits, carrying briefcases filled with ancient contracts and infernal legal documents. Their leader introduced herself as Lilith. Yes, that Lilith, the first. Edward Archer, also known as Edrazel, you stand accused of creating an unauthorized third-path binding without proper oversight. How do you plead? Guilty, Edward said calmly. But I invoke the right of demonstration. The binding is legitimate, beneficial, and worthy of recognition. Lilith's eyebrows rose. You invoke demonstration rights? Bold. Very well. You have 1 hour to prove your case. Maria stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. I'm Maria Richard, the human half of this binding. I'd like to begin by noting that I chose this freely, with full knowledge and clear consent. Edward revealed his true nature before the binding was completed. Consent is noted but irrelevant, another council member said. The issue is whether the binding serves Hell's interests or undermines them. It serves both Hell's interests and Heaven's, Edward interjected, which is precisely why it's revolutionary. The council members looked skeptical. Edward continued, For millennia we've been in a stalemate with Heaven. We corrupt humans. They save them. We gain ground. They push back. Endless, pointless conflict. But what if there was a way to create humans who were genuinely, willingly aligned with us, not through corruption or possession, but through partnership? That's what the third path offers. Maria hasn't lost her soul or her goodness, but she has gained access to demonic knowledge and power. She can operate in both worlds, the human and the supernatural. She can influence other humans more effectively than I ever could alone, precisely because she's still genuinely one of them. Maria picked up the thread. And Edward has gained something too. He's bound to human morality, yes, but that makes him more effective on Earth. He understands human psychology better. He can navigate human society more naturally. He's not playing a role anymore. He's genuinely integrated. Fascinating theory, Lilith said dryly. Can you demonstrate results? Yes. Edward pulled out his tablet and showed them data. Records of souls influenced, businesses corrupted, institutions compromised. All was accomplished in the 2 weeks since their binding, and all was achieved more efficiently than in the previous year of his solo work. This is the power of partnership, Maria said. I'm not his victim. I'm his equal partner. And together, we're more effective than either of us could be alone. The council members conferred in a language that hurt Maria's ears to hear. True infernal speech, older than humanity itself. Finally, Lilith turned back to them. Your results are intriguing. Your argument has merit. But there's a problem. If we legitimize your binding, we set a precedent. Other demons might attempt similar partnerships. This could fundamentally alter the balance of power in ways we can't predict. Isn't that what Hell wants? Edward challenged. An advantage, an edge. For thousands of years, we've been stuck in the same patterns. The third path offers something new. Or it offers a way for demons to become too human, too soft, too compromised. This from a council member who had been silent until now. You speak of partnership, but I see weakness. You're bound to her morality. What happens when her morality demands you act against Hell's interests? Before Edward could answer, the apartment exploded with brilliant light. Maria threw up her arm to shield her eyes. When she could see again, there was an angel standing in her living room, not a cherub with a harp. This was a warrior angel, 8 feet tall, wings of flame, sword of light, expression of absolute judgment. Demons of the council. The angel's voice resonated like 1,000 bells ringing in harmony. I am Sariel, watcher of the third order. I come not as enemy, but as witness. The council members recoiled, demonic forms flickering beneath their business suits. Lilith remained composed, though her eyes burned crimson. An angel has no jurisdiction here, Sariel. This is infernal business. It became heaven's business the moment a human soul was bound to demonic essence. Sariel turned his gaze to Maria, and she felt judged down to her atoms. Maria Richard, you have done something that happens perhaps once in a century. You have chosen balance over purity. Are you here to condemn me? Maria asked, finding her voice. I am here to complicate matters considerably. Sariel's expression was unreadable. Heaven has been watching your binding with great interest. Some of my brethren want you destroyed as an abomination. Others see you as a fallen woman who needs saving. But a few of us, a very small, very radical few, see something else entirely. And what's that? Edward asked, positioning himself slightly in front of Maria. Possibility. Sariel lowered his sword, though he didn't sheath it. For 10,000 years, heaven and hell have been locked in war over humanity's souls. We save them, you corrupt them. They choose light, they choose darkness, binary, absolute. But humanity itself has never been binary or absolute. Humans live in shades of gray. They are capable of both great good and terrible evil, often in the same day, sometimes in the same act. The angel began to pace, his wings leaving trails of golden light. What if the third path isn't an anomaly? What if it's humanity's true nature manifesting in spiritual form? Good and evil, light and dark, human and supernatural, not in conflict, but in synthesis. Lilith's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting an alliance between heaven and hell. I'm suggesting a truce, limited, experimental, focused on third path bindings. Sariel gestured to Maria and Edward. Let them exist. Let others like them form. See what happens when humans and supernatural beings forge genuine partnerships built on choice, knowledge, and yes, love, or whatever approximates it. Heresy, one of the council members hissed. You would betray the eternal order? I would question whether the eternal order serves anyone anymore, Sariel replied coolly. How many human souls have been lost to despair because they felt they could never be good enough for heaven? How many have been lost to corruption because they believed themselves already damned? The binary system fails humanity. Perhaps it's time to offer a third option. Maria felt the weight of what was being discussed. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She was potentially at the center of a spiritual revolution. Comment revolution if you're still watching. The ending will leave you speechless. The room fell silent. Angel and demons, natural enemies, stood in Maria's living room, debating the future of spiritual warfare itself. Finally, Lilith spoke. If we agree to this experimental truce, and I'm not saying we will, what would it look like? Recognition of third path bindings as legitimate, Sariel said. No interference from either heaven or hell. Bound couples would be neutral parties, allowed to exist without persecution. In exchange, they would serve as a test case. We observe, we learn, we see if coexistence is possible. And if the experiment fails, another council member asked. If these bindings become problems, then we reconvene and discuss next steps. But we give it time, at least a century. Edward looked at Lilith. You're considering this. I'm considering that we've been stuck in stalemate for millennia, and that anything different is worth exploring, Lilith admitted. But I'll need guarantees. The bound ones can't work directly against hell's interests. And they can't work directly against heaven's, Sariel countered. They must be truly neutral, free to make their own choices for good or ill. Maria stepped forward, surprising herself with her boldness. What if we go further? What if third path bindings aren't just neutral? What if they're mediators? We exist in both worlds. We understand both perspectives. What if couples like us could help resolve conflicts, negotiate disputes, maybe even prevent unnecessary suffering on both sides? The angel and the demons stared at her. Then Sariel began to smile, a terrible, beautiful expression. The human speaks wisdom. Perhaps this is the true purpose of the third path. Not just coexistence, but translation. Bridge builders between worlds. Ambitious, Lilith said. Possibly naive, but... She looked at the other council members. What we're doing now isn't working. Evil for evil's sake is hollow. Corruption without purpose is wasteful. If the third path offers something more strategic, more effective... She paused. I move to recognize the binding of Edward Archer and Maria Richard as legitimate and protected under experimental truce conditions. One by one, the other council members nodded their agreement. Some looked angry, some looked intrigued, all looked uncertain. Sariel raised his sword in formal salute. Heaven's radical faction concurs. The truce is witnessed and recognized. Maria Richard and Edward Archer, you are the first officially recognized third path binding. Others will follow if you succeed. The eyes of both heaven and hell are upon you. No pressure, Maria muttered. And despite everything, Edward laughed. The council members vanished in clouds of sulfur. Sariel lingered a moment longer. One warning, Maria Richard. You have chosen to walk between worlds. That path is neither easy nor safe. You will be tested by both sides. You will face situations where good and evil are indistinguishable. You will question everything you believe. I'm already doing that, Maria said quietly. Then you're precisely who we need. Sariel spread his wings. May you find grace in the darkness and wisdom in the light. And then he too was gone. Maria and Edward stood alone in their living room, dawn breaking through the windows. They were still married, still bound, but now they were something more. Pioneers of a new possibility, architects of a bridge between ancient enemies. Well, Edward said finally, that escalated. Maria started laughing, slightly hysterical. We're supernatural diplomats now. We got married and accidentally started a peace process between heaven and hell. Is it too late to elope to Vegas and pretend to be normal? I think that ship has sailed. Maria took his hand. Human form and demonic truth both visible to her now, neither frightening anymore. So what do we do now? Now? Edward pulled her close. Now we figure out how to be married. Everything else, the councils, the angels, the fate of spiritual warfare, that's later. Right now, I just want to have breakfast with my wife. You don't eat breakfast. I'm learning. And in that moment, that simple domestic moment, Maria understood something profound. Love, real love, wasn't about perfection or purity. It wasn't about light defeating darkness or darkness consuming light. It was about two beings choosing each other, flaws and all, and building something together that neither could build alone. She'd married a demon, but he was her demon, and she was his human. And together, they were something entirely new. Before we finish, let me know in the comments. Would you choose the third path? Could you love someone or something that exists between good and evil? 1 year later, Maria stood in the same cemetery where Edward had proposed, but this time she wasn't alone. Around her were 15 other couples, humans and supernatural beings, all bound by the third path. There was Rachel and Azrael, a teacher married to a former angel of death who now ran a hospice care program. There was Marcus and Seraphina, a lawyer and a succubus who had started a non-profit helping trafficking victims. There was Yuki and Kage, an artist and a shadow demon who created installations that made people confront their deepest fears. All of them walking the line between light and dark. All of them choosing balance over extremes. Edward stood beside Maria, his hand in hers. Over the past year, he'd continued to change. His reflection was solid now. He could taste food. He'd started feeling genuine empathy, not simulated, but real. And while he was still a demon, still connected to hell, he was also undeniably something more. Maria had changed too. She'd quit her job at the private collection and started her own consulting firm, helping people identify supernatural influences in their lives, mediating disputes between humans and supernatural beings, teaching others about the hidden world that existed alongside the mundane. "Thank you all for coming," Maria said to the gathered group. "A year ago, Edward and I stumbled into something we didn't fully understand. We thought we were just trying to save our marriage. We didn't know we were starting a movement." "It's not a movement yet," Rachel interjected with a smile. "We're barely a support group." "But we're growing," Marcus added. "Every month, more bindings, more people choosing the third path, and the councils, both of them, are watching." "Let them watch," Edward said. "We have nothing to hide. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We struggle. But we're proof that coexistence is possible. That love, or whatever this is, can exist between any two beings who choose it." Sariel appeared then, materializing in a flash of light that no longer made Maria flinch. "Speaking of the councils, I bring news. Heaven's hierarchy is divided. Half want to shut down the third path experiment, but the other half have seen your results. Reduced suffering, increased understanding, problems solved through dialogue rather than spiritual warfare. They're intrigued." "And hell?" Maria asked. Lilith stepped out of the shadows, making several of the newer bound ones jump. "Hell is predictably chaotic about it. Some demons see opportunity, others see betrayal. But the data is undeniable. Third path agents are more effective than traditional corruption. You've made hell more efficient, which is the closest thing to a compliment we offer." "So what happens now?" Yuki asked. "Now you live," Sariel said simply. "You build your lives, your partnerships, your families. You show both heaven and hell what coexistence looks like. And when the time comes for the councils to meet again, perhaps in another century, we'll have real data to discuss." "A century is a long experiment," Maria noted. "For humans, yes. For us?" Lilith smiled. "It's barely a heartbeat. But if it works, if you prove that the third path is viable, you might just change everything. Heaven might learn mercy, hell might learn purpose, and humanity might finally understand that they've never been required to choose between light and dark. They've always been allowed to be both." The supernatural beings vanished, leaving the bound ones alone in the cemetery. Someone suggested dinner, a normal human tradition. They all agreed, walking together toward the restaurant, talking and laughing like any group of friends. Maria and Edward walked at the back, hands intertwined. "Do you think we'll make it?" Maria asked quietly. A century is a long time. We're bound for as long as I exist, which is essentially forever, Edward reminded her. The question isn't whether we'll make it, it's who we'll become along the way. I'm terrified. So am I. Edward stopped and turned to face her. I'm a demon who's learning to feel fear, love, hope, things I was never designed to experience. You're a human who can see angels and demons, who's no longer quite mortal. We're both becoming something new. It's terrifying. It's also the most genuine thing I've ever experienced in 3,000 years of existence. Maria looked up at him, both his forms visible to her always now, human and demonic, merged into one complex being. I love you, both of you, all of you. I love you too. I don't know what that means for a demon, but I feel it. Whatever love is, whatever it's supposed to be, I feel it for you. They kissed there in the cemetery, under a full moon, a human and a demon, choosing each other every day, building a bridge between worlds, one moment at a time. And somewhere, in dimensions beyond human perception, heaven and hell watched and waited to see if love could truly conquer all, or if, at least, it could convince all to coexist. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible supernatural tales. What did you think of Maria and Edward's story? Could you choose the third path? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see more stories about the bound ones, let me know. Maybe we'll revisit this world soon. Until next time, remember, the line between good and evil is never as clear as we think. Sometimes the bravest choice is to walk between them both,